Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our webinar on Real District Wins in Science, Common Assessments, Better Data, and Stronger Instruction. We will be getting started here in just here. I'll actually set my timer, so I actually mean what I say. We'll set this for just about like 2-ish minutes or so just to give an opportunity for other people to join us. And then we'll go ahead and we'll get started. And in the meantime, while we're waiting, if you could pretty please introduce yourselves in the chat. If you go down to where it says chat, there's this little blue box. And it actually defaults to 2 hosts and panelists. But what you can do is you can actually change it to everyone, and then everyone can see you introduce yourself. It's always really fun with these webinars just to see who's joining us from like different parts of the country, what roles you all do. And don't worry, we will also be introducing ourselves as well. So we will return the favor. So if you don't mind going down to the chat, going to everyone and introducing yourselves, then we'll go ahead and get started in just about a minute or so. Thank you for kicking us off, Erin. Erin, I've been meaning to ask you because I haven't had a chance to chat with you yet today. Have you watched the new Survivor 50?
Not yet. And we've been like really, really excited for the kickoff. And I even joined like the Survivor newsletter list. I don't know if you, because last season, season 49, they were really promoting season 50. So I joined the newsletter and there was all of this lead up of like you could vote for like the different changes to the game for season 50. I think they even had like an idol scavenger hunt per state. Like there was all of this lead up. So it'll be really interesting. Did you see that thing too, where you could like, oh, because that's what it's called. It's like in the hands of the fans. And so the fans could vote, like, do you get rice or not? Like, did you participate or see any of that?
I knew it was happening, but I didn't actually participate, if that makes sense. But I saw that they were doing in the hands of the fans. And honestly, I just like looked at the cast list and I'm stoked. Like this is just it's gonna be so epic. And we haven't watched it yet, but I think we're gonna like my husband and I will like reserve like a special date night and like make sure we are actually like awake and alive and give it our full attention.
Yeah, that sounds good. Have you seen any of the previews too? Because they've been like some teaser trailers. Yeah, so I've seen, so it's not a spoiler, I guess, if you've seen the teaser trailer, that they're gonna have like different celebrities come in. Like, okay, maybe it's a spoiler. Sorry, I see your face.
No, I have. I'm more just like
Oh,
excited
okay.
and I can't remember who comes, but I did see that.
Yeah, and it's gonna be
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our webinar, Real District Wins in Science, Common Assessments, Better Data, and Stronger Instruction. Thank you to those of you who started introducing yourselves in the chat. Please feel free to continue introducing yourselves. There's that little button at the bottom. Go ahead and change that in the chat to everyone so everyone can see you introducing yourself. And as promised, we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves before we go ahead and kick off here. So hello, everybody. My name is Emily Miller. My pronouns are she, her. Prior to coming to InnerOrbit, I was a high school chemistry teacher for 10 years in Minnesota, and I taught in our alternative learning program, regular chem, honors chem, so lots of different ways to teach a lot of different kids. I also got to be a PLC data leader, which I loved, and now I get to work with different districts and help them implement InnerOrbit. And my hot take is just plain old black coffee is the way to go in the morning. Like I am not a functioning human. And even if there is like fancy coffee options, I always just start with just some plain black coffee to get going. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Erin.
I actually didn't know that about you, Emily. I have so many questions, but I'll move to me. Hey, everyone. My name is Erin. My pronouns are she, her as well. My roots are in elementary education, ESE, and then instructional coaching as well at a K-12 school. And I have my doctorate, my EDD in teacher schools and society. With InnerOrbit, I'm our chief customers officer, so I get to support all these amazing folks on the call today. And my hot take is that you can be both a cat and a dog person. The world tells you you have to be one, but you can be both, which I am. And I also have the pleasure of introducing a third speaker with us today. Her name's Jasmine. She'll be joining us a little bit later. She has training with some of our other partners. Her pronouns are she, her. Her background is in high school science, specifically biology. She first joined our team as an assessment writer, actually with our content department. And then we snatched her up and brought her into our customers department. So she's one of our incredible account managers that supports a lot of the districts we'll be chatting about today. So she's super cool. And her hot take, maybe even the most controversial hot take of all of ours, is that pineapple belongs on pizza. It is a match made in heaven. So that is Jasmine. Back to you, Emily.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the most controversial. I am not a fan. Pineapple on pizza. All right. So for our webinar today, our hope is to highlight how other districts are approaching 3D assessment and instruction through the use of common assessment cycles. And we're hoping that this is going to give you some ideas and strategies that you might be able to take back to your team to try to give you some inspiration and insight. We're going to be here for about an hour, maybe a little bit less. First, we're just going to introduce what is InnerOrbit, just so you kind of know who we are and what we do. Then we'll do a very quick review of some of the key essentials of the NGSS, just to make sure we're on the same page. Then we're going to talk a little bit about our InnerOrbit proven process, which is essentially a way to kind of like frame assessment cycles. Then we're going to go ahead and actually get into our district stories. So we are featuring a district from Connecticut, a district from New York, and a district from Oklahoma. Then we're going to save some time at the end for an optional Q&A in case people have specific questions about the districts we're discussing. You can go ahead and drop those in the chat, or there's actually like a Q&A button in Zoom as well. And it just kind of like keeps like a nice little catalog of any questions that people submit, and then we can answer those at the end. So you can do the chat or the Q&A. We'll go ahead and check out both. And then we'll call it a day. And since we're telling some district stories, I went ahead and put a little Elmo GIF in there. I don't know if you guys have been following like Elmo's like tweets or things like that, like in social media lately, but they've been hilarious and really heartwarming. All right. So like I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and start off with just what is InnerOrbit. So InnerOrbit is an assessment platform. We have an item bank of over 10,000 items that are all aligned to the NGSS that you can use to build high integrity 3D assessments that then give you meaningful and actionable student data. So our data reports are super detailed, and you can really drill down to the different dimensions of the NGSS to see where students may need some more support. And all of those questions I mentioned are also phenomena based. We also try our best to make the NGSS more accessible for both you and your students. So we do this through different scaffolding approaches with our questions. We do this with different like PD and training opportunities because, as you know, the NGSS can be a little bit of an alphabet soup and can be a little complex to tackle. So we do our best to break it down for all of you. And with that, the last thing is we provide guidance and supporting resources in PD to help you reach your goals. Much like the webinar we're doing right now, we like to offer different training sessions like the one that Jasmine's at right now, and other ways to help support our potential customers and current customers really get what they need to when it comes to NGSS assessments. So speaking of the NGSS, I like to do just a couple of these slides at the beginning just to make sure that we're all good to go with all of those different letters. So right here, I have a performance expectation. It is a third grade performance expectation. It is life science, and it is like the fourth domain, the third one down. And what is unique about all of these performance expectations within the NGSS is they all incorporate 3 different dimensions. The first of which being is the disciplinary core idea, or the DCI. This is the content portion of the standard. So for example, with this third grade standard, we're looking at this idea of adaptation. So the fact that some organisms can survive well, not sort of well, and not well in certain environments. So that would be like the information or the content that we are teaching our students. Now, usually as science teachers, we feel pretty good and feel pretty confident with that. But this is where the NGSS is kind of like widened what we're trying to have students to do by adding in these additional dimensions. The other one being the SEP, or the science and engineering practice. This is what we want students to actually be able to do with that content and information, and like the skill that is embedded within the standard. So for example, in this particular PE, the SEP is engaging in argument from evidence. So we actually want students to construct an argument with evidence to demonstrate their understanding of adaptation. So rather than just saying, polar bears won't survive in the desert, we want them to get some evidence and construct an argument on why a polar bear might not survive in the desert. And then the last dimension that is incorporated is the cross-cutting concepts, or the CCCs. This is how students think, or like the lens in which they approach the problem, or these overarching main scientific principles that are included regardless of content, regardless of grade level, that we really want students to be comfortable with. In this case, it is cause and effect. So this idea that habitats cause certain organisms to survive well or not well. So within every single standard, we're going to have these three different dimensions. And for students to be proficient with the standard, they need to be able to utilize all three of these dimensions. And it can be a lot. So something we've done here at InnerOrbit is we've written our questions in a way that slowly scaffold to that three-dimensional rigor. So if you're on our site, one of the first questions you're actually going to come across is a one-dimensional DCI only question. This is kind of like the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell type of questions. Now, our goal is to move beyond these questions, but it is also important to make sure our students actually understand the content and understand like the backbone of the standards that we're trying to teach them. From there, we can then give our students what we call our two-dimensional questions. These questions still have the content embedded within them, but then we assess students on either the cross-cutting concept or the SEP layered onto that content. This gives students a really nice opportunity to practice these skills individually. And it also gives you really interesting data to see which dimensions students may need more support with before you see our three-dimensional questions. These three-dimensional questions incorporate all the dimensions within the standard into one problem, and students being able to tackle these successfully would be aligned with what we would consider proficient with that performance expectation. So now that we've taken some time just to review the NGSS, we're going to actually talk about ways to kind of think about approaching a common assessment cycle. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Erin.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. And our main goal of our webinar today is really just highlight some of our really incredible partners that have taken the complexity of the NGSS using kind of InnerOrbit scaffolded questions like Emily just shared there, and highlight those amazing stories of success. And the common thread you're going to see across all of those stories is all three of these districts decided to implement common assessments. So here in this section, I'm going to dive into a little bit about what the definition of a common assessment is, what are the benefits, and then we'll dive into those stories as well. So a common assessment we define is the same assessment given across a school or district to gather context-wide data. When building any type of assessment, but especially common assessments, we recommend the 3A strategy. So there's 3 A's to this piece or this lens, which is assess, analyze, and action. So when you're first building any type of assessment, but especially through common assessments, we first want to consider, what do I want to know about my students' current understanding? From there, we'll move into analyze. And with analyze, we'll be thinking about, how are my students progressing towards proficiency using that data that was specifically curated or selected in the assess moment. And then when we go to action, we're thinking about what interventions can take place to help progress further. So when designing any assessment cycle, it's important for us to think, what are we actually assessing? What does our data mean in our analysis, and what action can we take? And common assessments are no different. So be sure in all of our stories today, we'll be breaking down the stories by assess, analyze, and action, so you can kind of follow all of those touch points. So be sure to, keep your ears out for that. And then we want to talk about why common assessments. So if we're assessing, analyzing, and taking action, what might be the benefits of doing that at a school-wide or district-wide level be? So we really believe that common assessments take a lot of the burden off of the classroom teacher. So we believe that assessments can have kind of like three lenses that we can do assessments as an individual teacher, which is really important. So you can respond to your individual classroom needs. That's kind of this middle salmon color assessment circle. But we also believe in the power of common assessments, because those assessments can provide many benefits. But really the main one is if you're starting your assessment journey, or really just tuning your assessment journey within your science practices. Sometimes that lift of professional learning, assessment design, and of course on all of our minds is time. Common assessments mean that assessments are already pre-created for those educators, so they don't have to design them themselves. And it gives, a lot of starting places. So really when you're thinking about an assessment system for your context, meaning think about, of course, those 3 A's, assess, analyze, and action, but also think about the vehicles of those assessments. Do we want to do common assessments for different benefits we're going to mention in a second too? Do we want teachers to have individual assessments in their classroom? And then also a lot of partners that we work with are not ready for three-dimensional or phenomena-based assessments as well. And they're at this sense-making practice kind of orbit we discuss. And at the sense-making practice, they just want to encourage kids to see more phenomenon, see more three-dimensional questions, but have it be a more low-stakes environment than an actual assessment, like an individual assessment from the classroom teacher or a common assessment from the school or district. So when we're talking about common assessments today, keep in mind that that one assessment strategy lives kind of in a larger ecosystem of classroom assessments and then also sense making practice as well. So let's talk about these benefits of common assessments, because common assessments can have different connotations. Maybe even you've been through different experiences having common assessments too. So common assessments, when implemented with care and thought, like we'll share in our partner stories, have a lot of benefits. So we have four specifically that we've seen. So the first is to establish clear and consistent learning expectations. All of them are important, but like, wow, this one is the one that I think is really fascinating, because what we hear so many times is that educators aren't exactly quite sure what assessing a cross-cutting concept looks like, or even really what is the goal of the SEP modeling for middle school. So being able to see really rigorous phenomena-driven assessments all together as a teacher team or across a school or district helps establish those learning expectations of where we want our kids to progress towards. And then of course that influences our instructional design once we have those shared learning expectations in the form of a common assessment, right? So the next benefit also is student data, that common assessments can provide reliable and comparable student data. So what we mean by reliable here is that it's already created at the beginning of the school year or already created for the educator, so they know they have an assessment they can rely upon. They don't have to, come up with it on their own. And then also comparable student data. Many times common assessment systems have more than one assessment. So you can see growth over time. You can also compare your data with another educator to kind of calibrate. So when we're all speaking the same language, a la student data, we have those reliable and comparable systems that we can build, which leads into the next benefit here, which those systems are really about strengthening collaboration and instructional growth. When educators and teaching teams have the same data that they can look at and analyze, they're speaking the same language, they can pull together, different strategies that they can try in those collaborative environments. So really we want to empower educators with having that common assessment so they can have common data, because we know when educators have those tools to collaborate, great things can happen. And then finally, as I've mentioned before, the fourth benefit, and this is a little bit more for our orbiters that are on the call today too, if you're considering, what type of assessment strategies I can use with InnerOrbit, we do recommend starting with common assessment strategies if it, fits your context and your teams are ready to go, because it's a really low lift introduction to shifting your assessment practices. It's a way that educators can continue to look at those common assessments throughout the year. They don't have to design them themselves. They're in a common shared experience, with their colleagues. So it's a really nice low lift introduction for teachers who are really shifting to 3D assessment practices. So we're going to pause here. And because we have some really great folks who are chatting in the chat, and I'm sure other people who want to share as well, we really want to hear from you all. The purpose of this webinar is to share these stories and strategies and ideas to help inspire ideas for your context. So for common assessments and these four benefits that we've listed, which of those benefits do you think you and your team need the most right now? Clear and consistent learning expectations, reliable, comparable student data, strengthening collaboration, instructional growth, or maybe a low lift introduction to InnerOrbit. So take a beat to think, and then feel free to share that benefit in the chat, and maybe why do you feel like your team needs that the most right now? I know for me, when I was in my prior teaching teams and I was trying to collaborate with some of my fellow educators, it was really difficult for us to make decisions together as a group when all of our assessment data was different, because we would maybe bring different evidence to the table, and then we would say, well, I was assessing this, were you assessing that, but I came at it from this angle, you came at it from this angle. Even maybe the rigor of the questions was really different. So having data to strengthen collaboration was really important for our assessment design. Emily, did you have when you were teaching, any of these benefits resonated with you the most?
Oh, yes. For me, the one that really resonated was that establishing clear and consistent learning expectations. When I was in the classroom, I was on a team of teachers who had really wide variety of experiences within the classroom and taught at different levels, at a more honors level. So everybody kind of had a different point of view when it came to what those learning expectations should be. So once we made this shift to common assessments, it was really nice to make sure that we were all on the same page for like, what do we really need students to like walk out of here being able to do and having those really good conversations around what that should look like.
Well, groovy. Well, if you have other ideas, please keep sharing them in the chat. We'll kind of keep responding as we go. But without further ado, now that we have this foundation, what the NGSS is, how we can scaffold NGSS with 1D, 2D, 3D questions, then even talking about the main thread of our stories today is really going to be common assessments. Let's talk about one of our incredible districts. So I'll start with this first story and then I'll pass it to Emily afterwards. And I'm really excited to share a story about this district from Connecticut. We've partnered with them for the past 2 school years, and specifically this school year, we rolled out the common assessment system. And the first year of implementation was really about educators exploring, getting used to InnerOrbit, gathering insights and conversation with their leaders. And then this year, we implemented those assessments from all of that insight the first year, which is super cool. So as I highlight this district, I'm really going to be taking the perspective and lens about how they structured their common assessments behind really clear whys. So the context of this district is they are a large urban public school district in Connecticut, and the science leadership team is really working on shifting the whole department into their shared belief that science is for all students. And what they decided to do is this school year, as I mentioned, they wanted to strengthen that district common assessment cycle. So results would lead to timely next steps is kind of the lens they wanted to take and the purpose behind finding a common assessment solution that worked best for them. When they were exploring InnerOrbit during their first school year, teachers were kind of playing around with the site, making some smaller assessments. They were able to see that teachers were quickly able to see patterns in their data and adjust instruction while learning is still in motion. So they really wanted to capitalize that in a common assessment system. So Heather, who is the leader who is designing this work for the district, she's a middle school science coach. She supports educators across multiple schools year round. So she worked with the rest of the district leadership team to shape this shared assessment approach that really protects teacher time, returns actionable results faster, and gave the district a clear view of learning trends to guide support. So when she was pulling together the insights from the first year of implementation, she highlighted these 3 specific educator needs. So she obviously had a clear purpose for the district, but she really wanted to make sure that the common assessment design responded to what educators were saying they needed as well. So again, those 3 ones really quickly were making 3D aligned assessment creation and scoring more doable for teachers, getting results quickly enough to adjust instruction in real time. Otherwise, why are we assessing? It's a lot of classroom time wasted if we can't, respond quickly. And then aligning classroom level data and a consistent view to detect trends and drive instructional next steps at higher levels as well. So from those needs, this district selected a common unit assessment strategy, meaning that the district provided pre-built pre-unit, mid-unit, and post-unit assessments for educators to assign on their own according to their own classroom pacing. So it's kind of like a big bank of pre, mid, and post-unit assessments on InnerOrbit that teachers can pull from throughout the year. This worked because teachers had custom, high-quality, district-made assessments from InnerOrbit ready to go. So there's our assess stage. For Analyze, educators were able to have data at the 3 most critical parts of their unit to identify priority needs and trends, to then take action, our final A here, by supporting students with small group scaffolds, practice, and reteaching. At a high level too, with this strategy, Heather, the science coach, was able to see the aggregated data from all of these different assessments as teachers are giving them throughout the year to be able to provide resources, training, celebration, etc. So in rolling out these common unit assessments, Heather really wanted to focus on 2 things when she was rolling out these unit assessments across the district. So being clear about the purpose and structure of the assessments, and then creating a data to instruction routine. So here in this slide, we're going to talk about that first one, about being clear about the purpose and structure of these assessments with her educators. So being clear about that purpose helps make the assessment use consistent across those schools. So she really defined these 3 assessments that were available per unit as with these 3 guiding questions. So for pre-assessments, She communicated to educators that this assessment's really supposed to help you understand what do students already know. For a mid-unit check, they were defined as what do I need to adjust in instruction? And then the purpose of the end of unit assessment was what changes do I need to make moving forward? Heather highlighted these common unit assessments and how they met her teachers' needs. So she was telling her teachers, like, hey, these are gonna meet your key priorities. Like, you see now, like, the purpose behind each assessment. They're really here to help you adjust your instruction. She said, I'm gonna create these all before you even start the unit, so I can protect your time with these pre-made, auto-graded assessments, which is fantastic. And especially with those guiding questions, she was saying that these assessments are gonna be able to provide you clear data to decide the next steps for each of those types of assessments, which were really cool. So how she did that on InnerOrbit is she made pre-assessments, mid-unit, and end-of-unit assessments. She created some district-wide folders, both for grades 5 through 8, and then also did a little bit of this work with high school. And then inside of those folders, she had these assessments already created for pre-assessments, common formatives, and end of units. And specifically how these were designed is that the pre-assessments were just focused on the DCIs. So she only used the one-dimensional questions that we saw with Emily's scaffolding questions slide. So these assessments were just assessing what knowledge, what do my students already know. Then for the common formative assessments, she picked questions from InnerOrbit that covered one-dimensional items, so just the DCI. She pulled some 2D items and then also some 3D items to see across this whole spectrum of the sense-making scaffold, how are kids doing at each of those levels of rigor. And then for end-of-unit assessments, she only pulled items that were 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional because it's supposed to be assessing, the full rigor and expectations of the standard. So she really wanted to make sure those summative assessments were rigorous with 2D and 3D items only. The second thing she prioritized when she was rolling out to the district, not only the assessment structure and how they designed those items, but also about the data analysis practices that educators could use post giving those assessments. So those teams already used a data-wise data analysis format, which means that you start with evidence, you name a priority need, you agree on an action plan. So InnerOrbit supported that data cycle that was actually already in place by giving those teams shared access to 3-dimensional reports to review together. The conversation stayed focused on the patterns in student thinking from that data and what to try next. That was so interesting. This district was saying that previously conversations post-assessments were more surface level, like centered on overall performance and whether students got it. So now the conversations during this data analysis time sound more like, what does this data suggest we should do next? Where are students getting stuck? What support will help? And what's one change we'll make in instruction starting tomorrow? So even the conversations around the data look different because they all had access to 3-dimensional data and were a little less surface level. So finally, the outcomes with this partnership, because they made those unit common assessments of pre, mid, and post assessments, it was very clear that teachers have always cared about data in their assessments prior. But with InnerOrbit, they really got clearer 3D evidence faster. So the next steps are really easy act on. Things that used to take hours of grading and a week or more to turn into action came back quickly through that 3D reporting, keeping, instructional decisions timely. And then one thing that we've also really celebrated with this district is that students are feeling the shift too, because kiddos now have regular sense-making assessments, which is, multiple times at bat for practice sense-making. And those assessments have those scaffolded types of questions. Kids are saying that their assessments are feeling more doable over time, increasing participation in scientific language in their classrooms. So looking ahead, this team is treating assessment implementation as a living system, gathering teacher how those assessments are going, how their data analysis is going as well. But the payoff is really growing, that students are showing stronger sense making and assessment readiness too, which is super neat. So I love to celebrate that Connecticut district with you all. And we're now going to hear another district story from Emily in New York.
Thank you so much, Erin. And like we said at the beginning, just to kind of reiterate, we are just here to share some different success stories and different ideas, just to kind of hopefully help you all potentially get some inspiration or ask some questions or just see what some other people are doing. So with that in mind, we're going to now talk about this district in New York. So this district in New York really had a need for assessments that was supported instruction in real time. So they were really looking for that data and that information in order to support students right now. This district also really wanted to provide some consistency within those district assessments. So common assessments really fit that need of having those like clear expectations across the board because they wanted to make sure that teachers, job-alike teachers, if you will, were teaching kind of the same ideas. But at the same time, they really wanted to also honor teacher flexibility. So I'm really excited to kind of show you how they kind of honored both this idea of like common assessments while also giving teachers some autonomy at the same time. This is a mid-size district in New York within the suburbs. They work with InnerOrbit on their grades 3 through 10. And the leader that is kind of taking charge of this common assessment cycle is their district science coordinator. And these little snapshots that you're seeing of all these district stories, this is actually something that we can email to all of you after the webinar as well. So you don't need to remember and process all of this information in real time. We'll send you these PDFs as well so you can revisit it. So as Erin was mentioning, a lot of our partners look at this common assessment system through this 3A assess, analyze, and action cycle. So for this particular district, they wanted to have those district common assessments by unit. So they wanted to kind of create that consistency with those job-alike teachers, but then to have that teacher flexibility and teacher autonomy, they let teachers kind of take the formative route on their own. So teachers were building their own, what they call like do nows, bell ringers, what have you, in order to get their own data along the way throughout the unit to see where their students were at and where they needed to support them. For their analyze, it was really similar to that first district where they wanted to look for those priority needs and those trends. But a really interesting approach that this district wanted to look at was that literacy as well. If you are familiar with phenomena-based three-dimensional assessments, there's a lot of reading. There's a lot of words. And so this is kind of a key thing that they wanted to look at their data through that lens of like students' literacy needs and where they might need support there as well. And then for action, when looking at that data, they were then deciding, okay, do we need to reteach anything? They really are focusing on that reinforcing that evidence-based reasoning. So using the phenomena and the evidence to make sure that that is supporting what students are saying. And then also doing some like specific targeted practice. So like I mentioned, when they kind of came up with this cycle, they wanted to have that clear alignment between instruction and 3D assessments. So making sure that when they're in the classroom and they're teaching this, are they covering those SEPs, those CCCs, those DCIs? And that's kind of where that common assessment came from. So this idea that to make sure that we're covering all of the 3 dimensions within our instruction. They wanted to help with that science literacy. And they also really wanted to normalize computer-based science testing. So New York at that elementary and intermediate level, they take their state science test on the computer. So they wanted students to be familiar with a platform like their state science test, and InnerOrbit's platform mimics a lot of those online-based science test programs. So diving a little bit deeper into their assess part of their cycle. Like I mentioned, they had these unit quizzes that were common and district made. They also had end of unit assessments that were common and district made by the district science leader. But then they had the do nows, the check-ins, the bell ringers individually made by teachers. So what this looked like actually in their InnerOrbit account is teachers could go in and they could find their grade level, they could find the quizzes, and then they could find those end of unit assessments. So the expectation was these are our common assessments. We want you to give all of these so they can see on that larger scale any of those patterns or trends in order to provide resources as needed. But then what's interesting is when you dive a little bit deeper into this account on InnerOrbit, all of pretty much every single teacher has tons of these small little formative check-ins that are made. And what's interesting about this is with giving teachers the autonomy to make these, they can kind of decide, okay, what do I need to know right now? So like I'm looking at my kids right now. Do I need to, some of these are more one-dimensional questions. So like I need to know right now, do my kids get the content before I move on? Some of these are more of that 1D, 2D, 3D focus. Okay, I need a snapshot of where all of like where they're at when it comes to all the different dimensions. So it gave teachers this opportunity to flex what they're currently seeing and get data to support what they're currently seeing at that same time. So those common assessments, those quizzes, those and those end of unit to provide that consistency, to get that common evidence and to make sure those job-alike teachers were teaching to those same expectations. But then teachers also had the ability to create assessments in real time to support what they were seeing in real time in their classrooms. So what I wanted to kind of highlight here with their data analysis is I wanted to focus a little bit more on what the individual teachers are doing with those do nows, since our other two district stories kind of focus on more of those district-wide common assessment data analysis strategies. So similar to the other district we saw, they review those results for patterns. But then again, remember, this district had that really specific approach at looking at science literacy. So looking at this idea of we're asking students to look at these really detailed phenomena-based questions. Also, teachers would often review missed questions in class and really get down to the nitty-gritty of those individual questions. So what I have here is this is some data from a teacher-made do now. So this is a one-dimensional question. This is one-dimensional, two-dimensional with the CCC, two-dimensional with the SEP, and three-dimensional. So again, this gives kind of like a nice wide view in terms of how are students doing with those individual dimensions. And looking at this data, the three-dimensional question had a dip as far as student proficiency. And so what teachers would do in this district is actually pull out that specific question and see if there was something unique about that question, or maybe something overall that they needed more support with the dimensions. So in this case, we can also see if there were some commonly answered distractors. But in this case, students were kind of all over the place in terms of like the breakdown of what students were trying to answer. And so when looking at this, teachers could ask questions with kind of the prompts of like, did they struggle more with the actual question, or was it the reading of the prompt? Or did they have a hard time looking at that graphic? Like, have we not really looked at pictures like that yet? Was there not enough evidence to justify their thinking, or did they not get enough evidence to justify their thinking? And then from there, what supportive practices will help moving forward? So by giving teachers this autonomy to do these short little do nows, they allow teachers to really dig into a really detailed view of the data to then support their students in real time so they could look at those bigger trends within those district-wide common assessments. And this district has seen a lot of success with implementing this model here. One of the big things is that teachers have a clear understanding of what a 3D assessment looks like. If you've been in the science education world for more than 10, 15 years, you know that this has been a big shift to what we used to do. So really having that understanding of like, oh, okay, this is the goal. This is what we're trying to get our students to be able to do. They're also increasing their instruction when it comes to scientific literacy, and teachers are being more reflective on their moves because they can see that data shifts in real time. And students are also seeing a positive impact as well. They're growing more confident when it comes to navigating online phenomena-based assessments. They're having stronger sense-making reasoning, and they have a greater ability to transfer what they're doing in class to that real world thinking. And that's a really big power of those phenomena-based questions, is students really seeing the impact of what they're learning in class, and then how it can go ahead and connect to not only what I'm seeing in the real world, but what I potentially am seeing in other classes and in other subject areas as well. All right, so that was our New York highlight. And my colleague Jasmine has now joined us from her earlier training, and she is going to go ahead and talk to you guys about our last district partner story, which is in Oklahoma.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Emily. Apologies for having to jump in a bit late today, but I'm Jasmine, and I'm super excited to talk about a district that I had the visiting last summer at a local conference in one of their schools. And it's always so awesome getting to learn alongside the teachers, especially in Oklahoma, since they are doing some really amazing work in science education. So let's get into it. This is the story of a large suburban public school district in Oklahoma that decided that if they're going to invest valuable time in the classroom, time in assessment, they want to focus on seeing growth across assessments, not just scores. So their science coordinator, wonderful Jess, I'll call her, leads this district in science instruction and assessment, and InnerOrbit supports their 4th through 12th grade teams. Jess and her team needed 3D aligned assessments that didn't just measure learning at the end, but gave results in time to adjust instruction. So this district really wasn't looking for more data. They were looking for clear evidence of student thinking, faster insights into where students were getting stuck, and especially a way to track growth from one assessment to the next. So what you'll see in their story is how InnerOrbit you'll see not just how they use InnerOrbit to assess students' understanding of core content, but to measure growth over time in a way that teachers could see and act on. So let's take a look at this district's assessments. In the assess phase, district leaders design quarterly benchmarks to monitor student progress ahead of state testing. And then in the analyze phase, teaching teams meet weekly in PLC data talks where they use a shared protocol to identify patterns, review 3D evidence, and plan targeted next steps for instruction. And finally, they act. In this step, teachers take a targeted instructional next step. They use flex time for small groups and check progress with a short formative assessment also on InnerOrbit. Their educator needs were very specific. They needed to be able to track sense-making growth over time, translate three-dimensional data into targeted instructional next steps, and they really wanted to make sure to introduce InnerOrbit early, even as early as fourth grade, so students can build comfort with phenomenon-based questions and online assessment. So this district built a really comprehensive system around common assessments to effectively measure progress over time, and then use those results to inform teaching next steps. It's a really big win-win for district level data and also data-informed teaching at the classroom level. So when we look at their assessment structure, they have common district benchmarks at 3 key checkpoints: beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year. And each benchmark uses the same assessment. It includes 3 2D and 3D questions per performance expectation. And they're really intentionally designed to mirror state assessments in length and coverage. This is really important because when the structure stays consistent, growth becomes visible over time. And here you can see an example for their 7th grade beginning of year benchmark where students averaged a 41%. And by the middle of the year, that moved to 48%. I'm super excited to see what the end of year looks like, but you can see that growth, and that really represents students strengthening their ability to apply their scientific knowledge, effectively use the practices, and think through the lenses of the cross-cutting concepts. So for Jess and her team, seeing this growth was really powerful because with this data, they weren't just saying, like, I think my students are improving, they could actually see it. And so when we move into looking at their data analysis, of course, like, this growth doesn't just happen because you give benchmarks, but the shift really happens in PLCs. And this is a huge priority for Jess to build teacher confidence through professional learning. So teacher voice is very intentionally built into every step of their assessment system, including in their PLC data talks. And in each of these testing windows, the teams follow a consistent routine of reflecting, supporting, and coaching. So in the reflecting stage, teachers debrief to name successes, opportunities, and support needs. In the support stage, teacher leaders coach peers through challenges and next steps. And in the coach final phase, district science leaders provide in-class implementation coaching to build confidence and ownership over time. So this protocol works beautifully with InnerOrbit's 3-dimensional reports because they not only show overall dimension proficiency, you can see in the screenshot here, but they also give data on the elements within a dimension. And this distinction helps keep conversations focused on student thinking. So instead of just asking, are my students getting it? They can specifically ask, where are students getting stuck? Are they struggling to connect evidence to claims, or is it something else? And that shift from score analysis to sense-making analysis is what really drives the growth that you can see here in this screenshot between the beginning of your benchmark SEP performance and the middle of your benchmark, where students are growing not just in the overall SEP constructing explanations and designing solutions, but also in every element within this SEP, which is so awesome to see. Finally, the impact of this assessment system shows up in 2 places, right? With teachers and with students. So for teachers, they have greater confidence adjusting instruction mid-unit because they have data to help them do so, and they have this protocol of support. They have sharper, more targeted small group supports, and of course, they have those PLC conversations that end with a clear next step. For students, their assessment routine feels predictable. They get timely support and small group flex time. They're building confidence navigating phenomenon-based questions. And I especially love this quote from a student in this district that was said during a lab. And they said, wait, this is the spider GIF from that assessment, the one that jumps out of the hole. And I feel like this comment really tells the real story, that students are transferring their sense-making connections from assessments into classroom discussion. And that makes it so assessment isn't separate anymore. It's a vehicle to use to reinforce what you're teaching. And that's just like an amazing connection that the student can make. So to wrap up, I think what's really amazing about this district and their leader, Jess, is that they really treat science assessment as a living system. After every window, they gather teacher feedback to ask, is pacing realistic? Are benchmarks surfacing the right evidence? And are supports usable? And so this district is continuing to build on the system, including starting to create formative assessments as well. But their vision stays the same. It's to keep assessment usable, to keep instruction responsive, and keep building towards confident sense makers in science class and beyond. So I love telling the story of this district. Thanks so much for learning alongside of me, and I'll go ahead and pass it back to Emily to wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. And that spider GIF comment is just like gold. It's like, it's one of those moments where it's like, this is why we're doing this, where it all just kind of comes together. All right. So just to kind of quick wrap us up here, I just wanted to review really quickly some of the main highlights from each of our district partner stories. So we had that Connecticut district that did the pre, mid-unit, and post-unit assessments that had the really clear expectations of the assessments, the specific structure of like 1D, 2D, and 3D questions. And they really use that to focus on priority needs to make those instructional shifts based on, is this a pre-assessment before I'm going to go into my unit, in the middle, or what do I need to do moving forward? For our New York district, they had those common unit assessments, but then had those individual teacher-made do-nows. So this allowed them to, again, identify patterns, but then reteach. So whether that is from the teacher do-now, like looking at a particular small set of questions, or looking at it from that larger common lens of, is there something we need to do across the board? And then finally, we just talked about our Oklahoma district, where they did those quarterly benchmarks at the beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year. And then from there, they were able to have those weekly PLCs, and teacher leaders were then able to help coach those teachers to help them grow, to then help their students grow, to actually see that measured growth between each benchmark. So really quick, we're all curious. If you wouldn't mind answering the chat, which one of these common assessment strategies do you maybe already use, or do you think could be useful for you and your team? So as you were listening to any of these, did you get inspired by something? Are you curious about something? Are you like, oh my gosh, I already do that something? If you wouldn't mind sharing in the chat, we would love to see what some takeaways of this were and what could be helpful for you moving forward. And while you're going ahead and answering those, I just wanted to quick review what we kind of came here to do today. So we wanted to highlight some real district use cases of InnerOrbit, and we wanted to equip you all with actionable strategies for common assessment strategies, so you could go ahead and try to use this on your, potentially get some ideas to use in your own context. We also wanted to just let you know that InnerOrbit has this bank of over 10,000 questions, and we've got those detailed 3D reports. So if while listening to your stories, you're interested in maybe seeing if InnerOrbit could be the tool to help support you with common assessments, we're going to go ahead and drop in the chat an interest form. So this is a piloting interest form. So you would have the opportunity to actually try out InnerOrbit for free and see if this is something that would actually serve and work for you and your team. This interest form is not a commitment. You are not like signing anything permanently. This is just letting us know that you're interested to learn more, and a member of our team will reach out to you. And then we could talk about some potential next steps of how you would maybe want to explore InnerOrbit. So my colleague is going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat here for that interest form. And if you're interested, go ahead and click it and fill it out. And like I said, somebody from our team will reach out to you, and then we can go ahead and explore and see if this is a good fit. So go ahead and fill out the interest form if you're interested. I also wanted to let you know that on our YouTube channel, we're going to post this webinar on our YouTube channel, and we also have tons of other past webinars posted on there as well. So if you're ever interested to learn more information, you can always check out our YouTube channel. You are also welcome to email us at any time at inquiries@innerorbit.com. And with that, with the 5 minutes that we have, we wanted to just open the floor for any potential questions that might have come up. I know that we really dug into some specific district stories, but if there's some additional context you're curious about these districts or about their decisions, or if you have some questions about how this could maybe apply to your situation, situation or anything at all, Erin and Jasmine are going to hang around for these next 5+ minutes and we'll be happy to answer those. You can go ahead and drop them in the chat, or you can go ahead and drop them in that Q&A section as well. Otherwise, have an amazing rest of your day, and please feel free to reach out if anything comes up.